Namaste and good morning. Before the sun rises too high here on this day before new moon of September Uposatha morning, I thought I would continue and talk about some of these questions and comments. I may be a bit late for that. The sun is already a bit too much maybe. We'll see how it goes. I'll start with a nice easy one. Did you have a family as a lay person before decision becoming Buddhist monk? Isn't. Not sure what the isn't question mark means. Did I have a family? I still have a family, yes. I didn't kill them off to become a Buddhist monk. But my contact with them, my associations with them, isn't perhaps as often as it was. Family relationships in the West are a little less attached than maybe in some, I'm not sure where this question's coming from, India or an Asian country or from someone in the West, but it's certainly a slightly different dynamic, as they say in modern speak. The 18-year-olds, or less than that even, but 18-year-olds generally go off, leave home and go to university and spend time away, and then not often is it that they go home back to their parents' house. They make their own way in the world, and we see our families on special occasions from time to time, and it's really much the same as that now as a monk. Of course, if you are living in Thailand or India and you leave the family to go and become a monk, that's quite a radical separation from the heart of the family, because you go from living in one place with the family to living in another place with your fellow monks, your new family, your monastic family. In England, it's perhaps slightly different because you're not living at home in the first place. It's quite unusual for adults, so over 18 years old, to be living at home with their parents. In terms of my own family, yes, I have been married and I have children, but they are grown up also. They left our homes and went off, made their way in the world after university, and have their own families. And I have, to date, one grandchild. So I still have a family. I'm still in touch with them, and even though before I was a monk I wasn't on the phone to them every day or seeing them every day, anything like that, so nothing much has changed. My eldest son, I met up with him in Nepal last year, and also again when I visited England I saw him, and I saw my middle son, the one with the grandchild there. And I always visit my mother when I visit England, and I do keep in regular as I possibly can, internet permitting, via some kind of form of contact on an internet telephone call thing with my mother every couple of weeks. Actually, I should do that soon. It's been a few weeks now, maybe even longer. So I contact my mother and speak to her. She's 83 and she lives on her own now, so she likes to tell me what she's been up to and just know that I'm happy and safe. So, yes. Did you have something else in your question? I think you did. Oh, you asked about something about modern day codependency. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have no idea what that is. I think I googled it and I still don't have any idea what it is. So I can't, I'm sorry, that's not something that's in my area of expertise or knowledge. I don't think I have any expertise, but experience, let's say. Wow, you're a great birthplace. Oh, someone's inviting me to visit the birthplace of the Buddha in Lumbini, which is in Nepal, and asking me if I've been there. Well, I have, yes. I went there back in 2014 or 15 or something like that, and again more recently. Yes, I've been to all of the main Buddhist holy sites, and I enjoy that very much, but I've now curtailed that because really my practice is about trying to stay put more or less in one place. I know I seem to be travelling, but that's out of necessity really, rather than choice. Visas, where you're going to spend the Vasa time, and various things that occur. So I have no plans to go to Lumbini just soon, but I do appreciate your offer to show me around if I do, and if I do I will look you up. But I have been there, yes. So sadly someone's sister is suffering from schizophrenia, and is there anything she can do? Is there any cure? Okay, well I'm not experienced in this either, and I will say, as I say in my written answer, that as I'm sorry to hear that, you must take your sister to a medical doctor for a diagnosis, who will prescribe appropriate treatment. That's all I can say. But what I will add, and this is by no means a medical or psychological opinion, purely from the perspective of a Buddhist monk, I will add that very often psychological difficulty, and forgive me, I'm reading my answer here because I want to be very careful about what I say, being as it's important. It's a very important subject when we're dealing with people's health, and we're not qualified or experienced to give any advice in these areas. But I did write and say that often psychological difficulties are the result of the surrounding conditions and circumstances you're in. So perhaps look at that, and if the cause, and maybe if there is something, a cause in those conditions that you can identify, if that can be removed, it may alleviate the symptoms, it may alleviate the problem. But that's not always the case. But very often it is certainly apparent that psychological conditions are really as a result of the conditions you're in, and often one can look at that and make some adjustments to remove those causes. So that's really all I can say about that. Now, do you draw? And any talisman manic magic? No and no. I don't draw. I'm not by no means an artist, I don't think. And talismanic magic, not in our tradition, it's not a thing. In Thailand they do have we have amulets, and they are usually little mini shrines. I have one because it's my mini shrine I travel with. It's a little Buddha statue, Rupa, in there, and in there underneath is a vial with some dhatu. Dhatu is the Pali word for relics, and relics are the remains after the funeral pyre of a arahant, after he's burnt in the funeral pyre. The dust from the ashes, it doesn't really go into just dust like we have in an urn in a modern day crematorium in the West. After the funeral pyre, which is really logs of wood all chopped up roughly and built into a pyre, the body's put on this, sometimes in a box, often not, just wrapped in a kusala cloth, so unattractive cloth, which is what we incidentally make these robes out of. After it's taken off the dead body, we are supposed to take this, wash it, dye it, and make it into these robes. No, I haven't done that. These were offered to me finished and made probably from new cotton or whatever. But that's traditionally what Buddhist monks were supposed to do, a kusala cloth. And then the bones and things all crumble down, bits of skull, teeth and this, that, into the ashes. And these then have to be bashed up to make into smaller relics, because they don't just all burn down in these, as they have in these furnaces in crematoriums in the West now. It's just an open fire, so as you can imagine. But very often with arahants, this kind of, it is a magical thing happens, that the ashes create some crystals, gem-like crystals from any colours of the rainbow, diamonds through to blues and turquoises and reds and purples, amazing crystals, and also some lesser obvious crystals. And this is apparently due to this sort of the fact that this individual was enlightened and had attained arahantship, that this happens. So there are many of these dhatu relics available. There are many relics available around in stupas and in various holy places and other monasteries throughout the world of the Buddha himself. How genuine these are, I don't know. They are said to be able to multiply themselves. So this is all magical stuff. But in the tradition I'm from and my background, I'm not so much into that. But I do have this little amulet which has some of these dhatu in a little phial, so small you can hardly see it in the bottom. And I use that as my mini shrine, just to put in a sort of a east-facing direction wherever I may be staying, to give me some idea as to where to bow and offer my homage to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha when I don't have a shrine room or a temple to visit. Keeping my practice up in terms of my faith and that side of the devotional side of my practice, which is perhaps the lesser part of my practice, but it is still there because I do find it reassuring to remind myself of this refuge we have taken in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And just by simply humbling oneself in a bow is sufficient to do that. And an object, not for veneration, not for magical powers, but just for something to mindfully focus upon, and something aesthetically pleasing to some extent, is useful for that purpose. So, but no magic, I'm afraid. I can't even fly, I'm very backwards with that one. But on this levitation and this flying thing, I think where this originates from is when you actually do go into the jhanas, the rupa jhanas, and the sense of bodily feeling is eradicated completely. There is this feeling that you're not actually, you have this actual sense when you sit to meditate of your solidity of the body, the gravity and your weight and your contact with the ground. So you're sitting like this and I can feel my bottom, my knees on this wooden surface that I am on. But when one meditates for some time and you no longer have feeling as one of the bodily feeling, as one of the khandhas, and therefore it isn't creating these sensations of bodily feeling in the mind, the replacement sensation in the mind is that of a very much a lightness and then even a floating effect, because you have this knowledge that you are still in the body, but you can't feel the contact with the surface. So it does feel that you are levitating, you are above the surface you are sitting on. I think this is where this comes from. I've never seen actual monks hovering above the surface, but I certainly have felt this feeling, as many people I'm sure have felt this feeling when their body becomes so light and so relaxed they can't feel it anymore. The contact between the surface you're sitting on and your body is no longer apparent, and therefore you feel like there's some levitation. That wasn't a question, I went off on a tangent there. Where's the question? Could you... Oh, can I send my address? Oh yes, and I've done that. So, but I will say you can't actually send me anything here in India. It's not economically viable. So someone wanted to send me some coffee, send me some things, which is very kind, and it's dana. So the problem with that is, if you send anything into India, unlike other countries, or maybe some other countries, it gets stopped at the post office. They have to see what it is, and anything within there, its value, however little or however great, is taxed. And the expense of the postage and this and that for sending, say, for instance, some coffee, when they grow coffee here, it's not economically viable. It's also, it takes a long time, for instance, my robes were sent to me from Thailand. They were held in an office at the post office for some time before I could find where they were, collect them, and then we had to, among Upasakas, raise quite a lot of money to pay the taxes to be able to accept the parcel. So it's not practical whilst I'm in India, but my address is available to anybody if they're in India and want to visit me. And then he asked if there's any other way he can send dana. Well, that is on the description page of this channel. There are links. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link and a PayPal link. That gets to me untouched because the kapia here, whom is allowed to deal with money, or wherever I am, I have an upasaka, a lay person who is able to deal with money, can go to an ATM and take money out to buy whatever's required that way. So if you wish to do that, there is that availability now. It's only recent because I found this difficulty only when I got to India. In Thailand it didn't seem to be a problem, but here it is difficult. So that's hopefully answered that. Okay, so maybe this is after another question. I think I'll have to leave that one because I think it's the second part of a question. What? Oh, I could have just gone to Midhurst. So I think this must be coming from someone in England. Midhurst is the town near Chittaviveka, my Buddhist monastery there. It is a Thai Forest Monastery. I did used to go to Chittaviveka. It was where I began everything that I'm doing now started there. It started actually with listening to some talks of a monk called Ajahn Brahm, who I'm sure you've heard of, and then that led me via various contacts to discover there was this beautiful Thai Forest Monastery in a real forest with waterfalls and lakes near this town called Midhurst in West Sussex, something like that, between Sussex and Hampshire on the border there. It was not very far from where I lived, and that is where my, I'll have to use the word because I can't think of another, journey in Buddhism began. I wasn't over 50, so yes, I could have ordained there at the time, but I wasn't ready to ordain. I waited, in fact, a further, I think, 7 or 8 years before making the decision to ordain. And then when I did, COVID came along, which created various difficulties. Consequently, I ordained in India. Otherwise, my plan, I was going to Thailand to ordain in the monastery where I trained for 5 years. Now, it was that monastery where my local monastery suggested, as I'd expressed an interest in perhaps training away from my home country, so giving some separation between my family and myself, even though I didn't live with them, I thought from a point of view of concentrating on the practice, geographical separation is going to be useful. Also, I thought it would be rather nice to go to Thailand and live and stay in the monasteries that I've read about in attained monks of old's biographies and visit these places. So not really as a tourist. I've never done the Thai tourist thing. I know nothing of the tourist places. I've never even been to Chiang Mai that people talk about so much. I've only been to, I think, 3 places in Thailand. But they were on the recommendation of my abbot then at Chittaviveka, that particular monastery you're referencing, you could go there. In fact, at first I didn't take his advice. I went to the international monastery, Wat Pa Nanachat, in northeast Thailand, but I didn't get on very well there at all. I really wasn't ready and didn't even last 24 hours. I was out of the gates, walking, running away as fast as I could. I found it a terrible experience. Now I would find it most wonderful and pleasurable and and a super experience, I'm sure. But then I wasn't ready. This was now, I lose count, 12, 15 years ago. But no, not that long ago. Not 8, 9, 10 years ago. But I found it too much to do. There was not really much chance for me to meditate, and I hadn't got the idea of then meditation is everything you're doing, not just sitting on the cushion. This was yet to come in my practice and in my development. So it was too much for me. So I ran back to Chittaviveka, and my abbot said, yeah, we knew you kind of wouldn't like that. You know, we didn't think it was you. You should go to where I did go, Wat Mark Jan. Now, I didn't live there for 5 years, not at all. I just visited there about 3 times a year for about 2 or 3 months, so a good part of the year. And in the interim period, because I had commitments, family commitments, and other winding down of business commitments to some extent in the UK, and also having not made the full decision to relinquish household life. Although I'd given up my physical house, my home, my flat, and moved into a van and was living on the eight precepts, in just a van on the beach, not a mobile home, just a very old, rusty, empty transit van, as shelter only really, but living a very ascetic lifestyle, which I'd also done previously to even discovering Buddhism, but that's another story. Whilst I was doing that, and then going between Thailand and the UK, I took some years, 3 years, to decide I will ordain. And then when I decided to ordain in the December of 2019, bang, the world went a bit strange. So I ended up in India 6 months later, after 6 more months in lockdown in my van on a beach in the south of England. So I know Chittaviveka very well, and I was there just last July. What are we now, September? No, a year ago, last July. Oh, hasn't it been a long time already? So we're September. So yeah, a year ago, last July, I was there when I visited England, because I had to go there to get a new visa for India, which I didn't get. I had to then do this again recently. Very difficult for British people to get anything more than a short tourist visa in India these days. Do you practice Anapanasati meditation? Yes, I do, and I talk about it all of the time on these talks. I also am quite fond, or growing quite fond, because chanting isn't my favourite pastime. It's becoming that. I made a determination at the beginning of this Vasa to chant every morning and every evening at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. They're not necessarily the usual times, but they are nice, significant point. I divide my day into 3s and 6s, you see. So I wake at 3 and meditate. Then I can chant and puja, we call it. But it's not really puja for me, because the lighting of candles and incense is not part of my devotional practice. It's just something we do. So it's really just the chanting, which is a reflection on the Buddha's teachings. And I made a determination, we call it an adhitthana in Pali, to chant every day at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So sort of sunrise and sunset. I think it's a nice time to do that. And to really make my commitment to that, I then, maybe rightly or wrongly, or maybe a bit foolishly in a way, thought, well, if I make it live on YouTube also, as that's possible here because there is internet, then it really doubles my affirmation, my commitment to do that, because I know that there might be someone watching live. I don't think there's ever many, but some people do. And then they're also available to watch later on, because they stay there on YouTube, don't they? But you'll see at the beginning, I hope that my chanting to some extent has improved, because at the beginning it was pretty bad. It's still not good. It's still pretty bad. But I'm doing it on my own. I'm used to only chanting in monasteries with other monks and following them, following a leader, following the other monks, which is a considerably different thing to just sitting in a room and doing it on your own. So I'm getting used to it. And one thing I like to chant, I'm becoming very fond of chanting, is the Anapanasati Sutta chanting version, which I wasn't very familiar with before this Vasa. Only the Anapanasati Sutta itself, but where I've been previously, that was not often chanted. But here, having the opportunity to chant that and pick what I'm chanting, I find it a very nice way of reminding myself as to the process and the technique of Anapanasati meditation. So it's not quite what you were asking me, but certainly the answer is yes. I recognise this little, you know, these balls that identify people? I recognise this ball as going to be a strange question. How would... Oh, I can't even... No, I can't even understand that. Well, I have given an answer, so I'll read the question. How would you reconcile the hypnotic herd mind and the instincts of a herd mentality. In somnambulism, much appreciated in your and much gratitude expressed. So, I mean, I know somnambulism, I know that's sleepwalking, because I used to, as a child, I used to sleepwalk. So I'm quite familiar with sleepwalking. And but as far as you're the first question, how would you reconcile the hypnotic heart-mind and instincts of the herd mentality? Oh, heart-mind. So heart-mind, I think you're referring to what we call this kind of citta in our tradition, which is not the intellectual, the brain, thinking brain, but this mind. A way of I describe that thing that loves, the thing that falls in love is often described as the heart, isn't it? But it's really technically the brain, the mind that's come up with all these ideas that make you love, and it's a sort of combination between the two. But indescribable, it's not locatable, and we have various ideas as to what this is in Buddhism and in other religions and in outside of religion. But heart-mind is a very good way of describing it. As far as herd mentality and reconciling that with herd mentality, well, my answer is I wouldn't try and reconcile it. I don't really understand quite the meaning of the question. So forgive my ignorance there. But at least we've talked a little bit about citta and how one would see what that is. Reconcile that without one's understanding what it is. Well, it's indescribable. It's that falls in love. It isn't the citta that falls in love. That's just a way of describing its indescribability. Right, can I talk about the differences between Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana and Zen Buddhism? There are other also, within those main traditions, 4 main traditions, many other segmentations, categories, which are in their own way very different. So you take Theravada, you can divide that up into so many categories and in different countries. So I can't talk about the differences between them all. Largely, the main difference in terms of the northern and southern traditions is how we break it down. The northern being anything beyond really the locality of India. The locality of India being Buddhism came from India, but then left India and spread out. Myanmar, Thailand and Sri Lanka have kept the teachings of the Buddha pretty much as they were and have remained as in the Pali canon, suttas. Outwards from there, as geographically Buddhism expanded, you have these other traditions, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Now there's all different views as to where it all originated and came from. But it goes into different scriptures in a different language, the Sanskrit language as opposed to Pali, and different interpretations of these suttas. The prime difference is in the southern, which is Theravada, and the northern, which is all of the others. Let's say, this is a broadly speaking reply to your question. Because if I was to explain all of the differences between them all, which I couldn't because I haven't got the experience of them all, although I researched the 4 main traditions before I finally chose Theravada, and then I researched within Theravada the different options before I chose the Thai Forest tradition direction, at least, to follow in. Even though I wasn't able to ordain in that tradition specifically, I've followed the teachings of that tradition and those teachers, those ajahns. The main difference being is in the Mahayana tradition, they take bodhisattva vows, which is to become enlightened and along with that ensure that all beings become enlightened also with yourself. In the Theravada tradition, the emphasis is to become free from suffering in this lifetime yourself. By this way, setting an example for others to do the same. And taking the view that you cannot enlighten all beings in this lifetime. It's going to take eons of lifetimes to do that. But the Buddha did teach you can become free from suffering in this lifetime. An arahant, the fourth stage of enlightenment. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you can't assist others to become also enlightened. I wouldn't be here living as a monk if it wasn't for many Theravada Buddhists, compassion and Theravada monks and Theravada arahants, fully attained beings, their compassion to teach and allow people like myself, also from the other side of the world, to learn and understand the Buddha's teachings and put it into practice myself. So that's about all I can say without getting too much into it. It comes up more or less in most of the talks. This question arises of one of the traditions or another, a practice from this tradition, a practice from that tradition, and people comparing it to say something I'm talking about in this tradition. So it's regularly spoken of here on this channel. This is rather... this you're describing some experiences of meditation, which are really quite wonderful experiences from what I'm reading, but they were some years ago, and you're perhaps asking me, just to sum it up, how to get back to that. Well, this is one of the hindrances. It comes under wanting, desire, the first sensual desire, not specifically like wanting a drink or something to eat, but attachment to something you've experienced good through your practice, wanting it to happen again. Now this will really stop that happening again. One has to let go of these past experiences and really get into the practice now, this present moment practice of what you're experiencing now. So bring your awareness back to these 5 hindrances of sensual desire, aversion, laziness, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Bring your attention back to these 5 hindrances. I spoke more in detail about them in the last talk or the talk before that, so you can get a lot more expansion on that subject in those talks. But for now, bring your attention to those rather than thinking or drawing comparisons to what you've experienced in the past. It is a lovely experience, but it's irrelevant to what you're experiencing now. What you're experiencing now is hindrances in your practice to any chance of attaining those experiences you describe again, because you're thinking about the past rather than being here and now in the present moment. So bring your mind back to the breath and observe the 5 hindrances, dismissing them as they arise, as just arising, staying a while and passing away, just that. I'll say that again actually, because this is really something that is the technique. You just bring your attention, your awareness to the breath and observe the 5 hindrances as they arise, stay a while and pass away. Dismiss them as just that. So, this is the little ball with the confusing questions. Affirmations before sleep are as important as thoughts observed in mind streaming. Good luck in mind streaming. I'm not sure what mind streaming is. Affirmations before sleep. If you mean, there are these things called affirmations, which mean like you stand in front of a mirror and say, I will be successful, I will be popular, I will be this, making these kind of mantra, encouraging yourself, things that they have in these motivational types of practices, secular things. Or you could just reaffirm your faith in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. If you mean that, that's a great thing to do before you go to sleep. Or reaffirm your commitment to Sila, Samadhi, Panya. That's a great thing to do, yes, before you go to sleep. Better to do before you go to sleep though, is reflection. Reflect on the last 24 hours, or since you awoke, how you have been in regards to Sila, Samadhi, Panya. How has your moral virtue been? How has your meditation been? And have you been developing wholesome mind states and eradicating unwholesome mind states? this is a far more productive thing to be doing, not right before you go to sleep, and then after you've had this time to make these reflections, then make an affirmation that, well, I didn't meditate enough today, so I will now reaffirm my devotion, my intention, I'll reaffirm my adhitthana, my determination to practice tomorrow sila wholeheartedly, keep those 5 precepts, meditation wholeheartedly. I will get up and meditate for an hour in the morning, and I will meditate for an hour before I go to sleep after these reflections, and say maybe half an hour during my lunch break. This is a slight expansion on just those affirmations. Just standing there or lying there saying, I will be improved. I think my grandmother used to say this strange thing, that I don't know whether it's appropriate to say this, but she used to say, I don't think I can repeat it, I must improve my... She used to say, I must improve my bust. Now what this meant, I didn't really know as a child, but it's something to do with breasts and girl guides and improving their size, if you like, in this respect. And it was this affirmation, this is what I think of when I hear these people talking about affirmations in front of the mirror. Oh, I will be successful, or that I will be liked, or I am really good. You keep saying this to yourself and it will become true. You know, it won't necessarily become true. I think my grandmother, she probably did have a substantial bust, but I don't think it's a result of her keep saying, I must improve my bust, while she was young and in the Girl Guides. I think this just happened as a result of causes and conditions, which is much more important. You put the right causes and conditions in place through the practice of Sila Samadhi Panya, keeping the precepts and wholesome acts of body, speech and mind, then all these good things, these wonderful blessings, as in that Super Mangala Sutta, the blessings there, will be there for you. You will have the results of these good actions. So vipaka, the results of karma, actions, it will be there as a result of causes and conditions, not just saying it. It does generate a positive state of mind, but you can't rely solely on that. The positive state of mind should have some content, some ingredient. So I will keep the precepts, I will meditate. Then I'll be successful, handsome, and have a bigger bust, whatever. You wouldn't, incidentally, you know what I mean. Can you talk about Vipassana meditation? Well, yes, I'm talking about it all of the time. Vipassana meditation, as you're probably though describing it, is what you might hear of the SN Goenka tradition. It's become their name of this type of meditation. Now it really just means, in the Pali, seeing clearly. Now we are developing this ability to see clearly through the practice of samadhi. So samadhi meditation, single-pointed focusedness on one meditation object, and Vipassana meditation, which they also call insight meditation, are not two different things in our tradition, my practice. It is part and parcel of the same thing. One develops samadhi, focus on a meditation object, in order to have the ability to see clearly, see phenomena arising, staying, passing away, which is how you're taught in Vipassana, to see mental formations as arising, staying, passing away. Even when walking, stepping, moving, stepping, this seeing clearly as your bodily actions take you from one point, turn and return to another. This is described as insight meditation, as Vipassana, but it is also all part of samadhi, like two sides of the same hand, the same thing. And I'm speaking about it all of the time. So when I refer to sati, mindfulness, I'm referring to seeing clearly what's happening in the present moment, vipassana. I think this is possibly, and this is a very short one, yeah, as I'll use this is a short one. then I should wrap this up time-wise, I think. Bhante, how can we manage to adjust our practice between verbal chanting and silent meditation? Can the first one be a contradiction? Can first one contradict the latter? I've chosen that because we were just talking about chanting. Well, yes, I thought the same thing. But what happens is when you become familiar with the chanting, firstly, chanting is not instead of or with meditation. It is best, I find, in my own practice, done preceding meditation. A way of differentiating between, especially for lay people, between your daily activities, then sitting, a little bit of chanting, and then meditation. This way you have this clear barrier between daily activities, the past, all of your concerns and the hindrances that can arise, and you're bringing all of your awareness and your attention to chanting, which is the Buddha's teachings, and also reaffirmation of your faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the triple gem. So chanting is a very good winding down exercise for the body and for the mind in that respect. But also, after time, as you become more familiar with the chanting, it becomes more of a mantra and does kind of generate in its own way a kind of samadhi. So on Uposatha nights, when we sit all night and chant Itipiso Bhagava Araham Sama, this 108 times, it is repeated so many times, not long into this chanting, when you're familiar with it, you kind of zone out into the chanting. I know zone out isn't a popular word in meditation because it's not awareness, but you are getting into a kind of samadhi with the rhythm and the chanting, because it's not something you're having to think about. Appreciably though, when you're having to read the words like me and understand how to chant it this way or not this way and trying to get it right, then it's really not blending well with the practice. But with time it does, which is why it's lasted for so long. But it's not a replacement for, and it's not at the same time, really. It's a great interlude. It's a great interlude between the day and the meditation, or whatever it was you were doing and the meditation. Even a short Namo Tassa Bhagavato a few times, homage to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, something like this is quite useful to create an actual break, an obvious break in your pattern of things. Hope you could hear me okay. So yes, that should be about where I should draw the line there for today. And I hope if there's something useful in there, because I'm getting the sun now, it's getting a little bit difficult. It gets very strong now. It's even only 15 minutes, 7:30. It's 7:30. So yes, I have spoken a while, haven't I? So thank you for watching. I hope there's something useful in there. And if there is, then please use it. But if not, then just let it go. Don't let it bother you. Don't let it trouble your mind or anyone else's. Namo Buddhaya. Be happy and stay well.